Katya stood in front of the entrance, her numb legs unfeeling. They had turned to stone from the cold. Her fingers ached so badly that even tucked into her pockets, she couldn't warm them. The damp wind lashed at her face, forcing its way under her thin autumn jacket, hastily thrown over her indoor clothes. She wore no hat, only wet, snow-matted hair whipping icy strands against her skin. Her frozen nose ran endlessly, but she had nothing to wipe it with. Everything had been left in the apartment from which she had just been unexpectedly thrown out. An old bag lay in the snow beside her, hastily packed with whatever had been within reach. Katya didn't remember what she had managed to shove inside, how she had descended the stairs, or how she had ended up on the street. The words of her mother-in-law echoed in her head. "You killed my son. You ruined him. You drained the life out of him." At first, the words had been spoken in a cold, constricting voice, like a snake's hiss, but then they had erupted into a wild scream that made Katya's legs give way. "Get out of here! Do you understand? Get out, and don't let me see you here again." She stood motionless, like a dog thrown out into the cold alone, humiliated, empty, having buried her husband with no home, no money. Tears mixed with the freezing wind, burning her cheeks, but she didn't even feel it. Her face had gone numb. Katya slung the bag over her shoulder and was about to take a step toward the entrance, hoping to escape the wind for just a moment, when the door suddenly swung open. "Before we continue, let me introduce myself. My name is Yura Nebo, and I wrote this touching story just for you. It will brighten your gray days and warm your heart. Write in the comments where you're from, the country and city where you're listening to me." From inside, along with the warm air, two large figures wrapped in furs appeared. Her mother-in-law wore an old fox fur coat and a fur hat, her face twisted in a smug laugh. Her father-in-law, burly and wrapped tightly in a coat with a caracal collar, had a grim look in his eyes. They almost ran into her, then stopped, silent for a moment. The mother-in-law's expression shifted from amused surprise to malicious satisfaction. The father-in-law spoke first, his voice deep and heavy. "What are you still doing here? Haven't you left yet? Did you think we'd let you back in? Dream on." Katya didn't answer, she just stood there, her eyes downcast. "I'd have found myself a toilet to sleep in by now if I were you," the mother-in-law sneered. "Turn around, girl, and do whatever you want. You're not welcome here." A yellow, battered taxi with a bright logo pulled up to the house. The mother-in-law squeezed inside first, without a backward glance. The father-in-law, holding his coat closed, slammed the door, and, cracking the window, spat angrily. "If I see you here again tonight, I'll call the cops. Got it?" The car roared away, leaving a swirl of snow in its wake. Katya remained standing, trembling, her shoulders hunched, not knowing what to do. Her legs, like wooden stakes, slipped on the frozen asphalt. Her fingers were cramped, her jacket soaked and clinging to her back. She had no money, no phone, no way to ask for help. One thought circled in her mind: to hide from the wind, to find shelter for even a few minutes. A man in neighboring glasses, carrying a shopping bag, came out of the entrance. He glanced at her and, without a word, held the door open. Katya seized the moment and slipped inside. The stairwell was warm, smelling of old carpet and sauerkraut. She sat down on a step, leaning against the wall. As she warmed slightly, she suddenly stood up, as if an idea had struck her. She stood for a moment, warming her stiff hands with her breath, then slowly, deliberately climbed to the fourth floor, to the apartment from which she had been thrown out just minutes before. Her eyes scanned the wall. In front of her was an old electrical panel, long since painted, with rusty hinges. Her heart pounded in her throat. Katya carefully opened the cover. There, on a bent wire hook, hung a key placed there long ago by her late husband's weary but caring hand. "You're such a scatterbrain, always losing your keys. I got tired of running across town to bring them to you. Keep it here in the panel so I don't have to come all the way from the other side of the city every time." Katya took the key, clutching it in her palm, nearly crying. She approached the door and turned the key. Click! The door opened. Inside, it was warm and dark. She stepped in and quietly closed the door behind her, not turning on the light. Standing in the hallway, she listened. All was quiet, but the tension didn't leave her. At any moment, her in-laws could return, and then she wouldn't get off with just a scream. Katya went into the bedroom. Everything was in its place. Her husband's pants and shirt hung on the wardrobe, as if he had just come home from work. dust on the windowsill, scattered pillows. She took a step toward the dresser and opened the top drawer. There had always been a stash of money there, but now it was empty. Only folded socks, undershirts, and coiled belts remained. The money was gone. Her hands trembled from the cold, from exhaustion, from despair. So even these last crumbs, her last hope, were gone. Her mother-in-law had left her nothing. She sank onto the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of emptiness pressing down on her. Where to go? Who to call? Who to ask for help? The question spun in her mind, finding no answers. On the knit stand lay some papers. Katya reached out and took them. They were pharmacy prescriptions. One was very recent, neatly filled out, with a stamp. The patient's name was her mother-in-law's. The date caught her eye a week before her husband's death. The name of the medication was unfamiliar. Her gaze fell on a package lying nearby. Katya opened the box. The pills were small and white, just like the ones he had taken. She remembered the time he had picked them up from the floor after her mother-in-law had spilled her own medication. "They look like mine," he had said. "I'll take them." Katya froze, staring at the pills. Her heart raced. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. He had put them in his own bottle. Then a memory surfaced clearly. An evening in the kitchen, the sharp smell of valerian, the whirring in her husband's voice, his sudden weakness, his complaints, the hospital. A cold spread through her chest. No, his death hadn't been an accident. It had been a tragedy. It had been murder. Katya swallowed hard. She was afraid her in-laws might return at any moment. Instinct told her, it's time. Something urged her to the window. She looked down into the courtyard. Her mother-in-law was walking along the trampled path between the parked cars, slowly making her way toward the entrance, a bag in her hand. Katya stood still, then suddenly jumped up, the papers in her hand shaking. She glanced at the clock. No more than half an hour had passed. In a panic, she stuffed the papers into her bag. One sheet slipped from her hands and fell under the knit stand. There was no time to look for it. Grabbing the bag, she rushed into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and, skipping steps, ran up to the 5th floor. There, in the corner near the trash chute, she hid, holding her breath, pressing herself against the wall. Below, the entrance door slammed. Footsteps echoed, the jingle of keys, the mother-in-law's grumbling. Katya held her breath, pressing herself even harder against the wall. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard throughout the building. When all fell silent, she quickly descended and rushed outside. She checked her bag. The prescriptions were there. On one of them was the doctor's name and with it, the hope that the truth existed. Katya walked down the snow-covered street, clutching her bag as if it could protect her from loneliness, cold, and injustice. Her thoughts raced from the prescription to the pill bottle, from memories to suspicions. Fear still gripped her, but now she had something more than suspicion. She had a purpose. The house where Inga, a nurse who had helped her husband during his health crises, lived was nearby. A 5-story building of the same gray brick, with peeling railings and flickering lights in the windows. Katya reached the right door and knocked, shivering from the cold. The door didn't open immediately. A short woman with tired but kind eyes peered out. Seeing Katya, her soaked jacket, her matted hair, her wine-reddened cheeks, she exclaimed, "Good Lord, Katya, you're blue. Come in quickly, don't just stand there." Katya entered on stiff legs. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and homey warmth. Inga took off her wet jacket, sat her on a stool, wrapped her in a warm blanket, put the kettle on, and, sitting beside her, asked gently, without pressure, "What happened? Tell me." Katya silently opened her bag, took out the folded prescriptions and the pill package, and placed them on the table. Then, looking at her hands, she whispered, "I found these at their place. My husband, he didn't just die." Inga put on her glasses, took the papers, and read them carefully and for a long time. When she finished, she set them aside and sat back, crossing her arms over her chest. "These aren't his medications. They're your mother-in-law's, apparently. This is a very serious drug. It's only prescribed for severe hypertension. He couldn't have taken them, it would have been catastrophic for him." "Why do you think he took them?" Inga asked. Katya lifted her eyes. Her voice trembled with pain. "At first, I didn't understand, but then I remembered. She dropped a bottle of pills once, and he picked them up, said they looked like his, and put them with his own. I even joked about it, but he didn't take it seriously. I think he took them for a week or two, thinking they were his. Inga nodded. Her face grew serious. If he really took them, it could have caused a sudden spasm or heart failure. It happens, especially if he was already weak. Katya clasped her hands together. Then she accused me, said I killed him, threw me out. Inga looked at the prescription and the package again. Then she looked at Katya differently with sympathy, but also with firmness. Here's the doctor's address. It's our clinic. If you want, I'll go with you. They know me there. I'll explain everything. You're not alone, Katya. You're not alone anymore. Those simple, ordinary words suddenly broke through the ice in her chest. For the first time that day, Katya felt the numbness leave her, and she burst into tears. They reached the clinic close to noon. The old building with light gray walls, narrow corridors, and the sharp smell of disinfectant. Inga led the way, confident as someone used to such places. Katya followed slightly behind, clutching her bag, barely comprehending what lay ahead. At the reception desk, they encountered a middle-aged woman with a stony face. Inga, without unnecessary words, gave the doctor's name from the prescription and politely asked if they could see her without an appointment. Only with a ticket, the woman replied, not looking up from the monitor. Or with a referral. Inga explained calmly, this concerns a possible medication error. It's a very serious situation. We only need 5 minutes. Wait in the hallway. Maybe she'll see you, but I can't promise, the woman replied indifferently. Katya sat on a bench outside the office, her knees drawn up, her hands clasped around them. Her heart beat dully, like a hollow drum. With each passing minute, the fear grew that they would be turned away, that nothing would come of it, that all their efforts would be in vain. She stared at the office door, white and indifferent to her fears. More than half an hour passed. People came and went. Finally, a nurse appeared, glanced at Katya, nodded briefly to Inga, and said, "Come in." The doctor was a woman in her 50s, with a tired face and a voice accustomed to restraint. She silently took the prescription, glanced at the package. "Yes, that's my handwriting. This medication is for Galina Ivanovna. She was prescribed a course." "What's the problem?" Inga looked at Katya and said, "Go on, Katya, tell her." Katya, her lips pressed together, barely audible, said, "My husband took them. He thought they were his pills. A week later, he died." The doctor set down her pen, raising her eyebrows. "Your husband wasn't my patient, so I can't comment. I didn't know about his condition." Inga intervened calmly but firmly. "He was a hypertensive with a complicated history. I helped him during flare-ups. He had contraindications for this medication." His wife, she glanced at Katya, claims the pills ended up in his bottle when he picked them up from the floor, thinking they were his. The doctor nodded slowly, checked the monitor, removed her glasses. Her gaze softened, her voice quieted. "I can't issue a conclusion without a forensic examination, but if he really took them by mistake, yes, it could have provoked cardiac arrest. I can't deny that. It's a possible side effect." Katya nodded, not lifting her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The doctor, after a pause, added, "I'm sorry, truly. Sometimes loved ones cause irreparable harm without realizing how much." Katya stepped into the hallway as if a weight had lifted slightly. For the first time in a long time, someone had said to her, "I'm sorry," not as an accusation, but with genuine sympathy. Inga caught up with her and said, "Next step, a lawyer. I'll give you the address of someone I know. Don't back down. See it through to the end." Katya nodded, for the first time with confidence. The private lawyer received them in his home, in an old two-room apartment where one room had been turned into an office. A massive desk was piled with papers and folders, a cabinet filled with files reached the ceiling, and an old computer hummed quietly. The man, in his 60s, with thin-rimmed glasses, looked at Katya with mild wariness. He invited her to sit without sympathy, but attentively, without haste, not wasting time. Silently, he took the prescription, the package, and copies of the documents. For several minutes, he read, making notes in a notebook, then checked the computer and began verifying the inheritance details in the database. The will was drawn up a month before his death. "I know the notary. Reliable. The signature is genuine," he said evenly, not taking his eyes off the monitor. Katya sat on the edge of the chair, her palms clenched, feeling her heart sink again. After the funeral, They said there was no will. They said I was nobody, not his wife, and they threw me out," she whispered. The lawyer looked up, slightly more animated. "That's a violation. The will is valid, and you're the owner of the apartment. Those who threw you out are imposters. Formally, this is already an administrative offense and potentially a criminal one, if you wish." He rearranged the papers, looking again at the pill package. "The case with the medication is legally contentious. Without a court ruling or autopsy, proving a direct link to the death is difficult, but as additional leverage, it's quite useful, especially since you've already spoken to a doctor who heard your statement. That's enough to start." Katya looked at the lawyer with growing hope. "So the case can be won." He nodded dryly, without fanfare. "With a high probability, but the main thing is not to delay. I can file a petition to restore your access to the apartment today and begin the process of evicting them tomorrow." Katya lifted her eyes. "I agree. I want to reclaim what's mine, and I want them to understand that they won't get away with everything." The lawyer smiled slightly. "Now I like you." In the evening, Katya climbed the stairs to the 4th floor of her building, accompanied by the lawyer. He walked calmly, confidently, as if he already knew what would happen. Katya felt everything inside her tighten not from fear, but from accumulated humiliation, pain, and anger. She was no longer the same person she had been that morning. Now she wouldn't leave silently. The father-in-law opened the door. His face twisted instantly, whether in surprise or irritation. He immediately raised his voice. "You again? Haven't you had enough? What do you—" He stopped short, noticing the man in glasses with a folder under his arm. "Who's this with you?" he demanded, his voice suddenly wary. The lawyer stepped forward, calmly and firmly introducing himself. "Alexander Igorovich, representing the interests of Ekaterina Dmitrievna. This is an official conversation. I ask everyone present to conduct themselves appropriately." The father-in-law took a step back, shouting into the apartment. "Galia, come here. Someone's here with papers." The mother-in-law emerged from the room. She was in a robe, her hair disheveled, her face tense. Seeing Katya, she squinted maliciously. "Have you lost your mind? What gives you the right to come back here? I told you clearly not to show your face here again." The lawyer took documents from the folder and held them out. "This is a copy of the will, notarized and officially registered. According to it, the apartment is fully transferred to the ownership of Ekaterina Dmitrievna. You've been illegally occupying her property." The mother-in-law snatched the paper, scanning it. Her face paled, she trembled, but then flared up again. "Forgery! He would have told me. My son would never, or you killed him." Katya stepped forward. For the first time, her voice was firm and clear. "He didn't die because of me. He died because you scattered your pills and didn't check. He picked them up, thinking they were his, and started taking them. I found the prescription. The medication wasn't his, it was in your name. I showed it to the doctor, and everything was confirmed." The lawyer added, "The pill bottle will be submitted as evidence if necessary. The fact of deliberate deception of the heir has already been established. If needed, we will file a lawsuit." The father-in-law was silent, shifting from foot to foot. But when the mother-in-law lunged at Katya in a rage, he suddenly stepped back, raising his hands. "I told you, Galia, not to mix everything into one bottle. I saw him pick up those pills. He thought they were his." The mother-in-law turned on him with hatred. "Why are you barking now? You're against me too. What does this have to do with me?" "I didn't," he faltered, and retreated deeper into the apartment, hiding behind her. Katya looked at them calmly, without anger, but with the certainty that only the truth had restored. "You wanted to leave me with nothing. You thought it'd disappear. Now pack your things. You're not spending the night here tonight. I gave you a day. There won't be a second." The mother-in-law said nothing, just stood there, gasping for air, unable to utter a word. The lawyer politely concluded, "At 8 p.m., I'll check that you've handed over the keys to the owner, or you'll have to deal with the police." Late in the evening, after the in-laws cursing and damning Katya had gathered their things and finally left, the apartment fell into a quiet stillness. Katya sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, a cup of hot tea in her hands. Outside, snowflakes swirled lazily, softly settling on the windowsill. The room, where she had once barely dared to breathe freely, was now her space, her refuge. Here, It was calm, quiet, safe. On the table lay a folder with documents from the lawyer. Next to it was that very key, small, simple, with a slightly worn head, the one that had hung in the electrical panel, placed there by her husband just in case and forgotten. Today, it had saved her. A message flashed on her phone screen. Inga had written briefly, "Are you home?" Katja looked at those two words for a long time, then slowly but firmly typed, "Yes, I'm home now. Thank you." She turned off her phone, pressed the key to her chest, and allowed herself, for the first time in many days, to simply sit in silence. Ahead were worries, new decisions, but tonight, for the first time, there was warmth, peace, and the certainty that she would never be thrown out the door again. And you're right whether you liked my story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. In just a couple of days, a new story will be released here, no less heartfelt, about true strength of character, love, and overcoming adversity. Don't miss it!